So let me admit, folks, since it is 8:30. Welcome, by the way. Thanks everybody for showing up. I'm sure we'll have some stragglers start tuning in here a little after 8:30. We always get one or two, and I know Raj is typically here. Typically he's pretty timely though. So, all right. Well, let's dive into it. Thanks everybody for coming to another fun episode of Friday Morning Coffee with Kirk and Shane. Hey, we got a couple great guests today. So Shane and I are probably gonna kind of step aside here and not spend a whole lot of time. Let me just talk real quick. By the way, you guys know me. I think everybody has been here multiple times. I'm Kirk Brewer, the branch manager of Finance of America at the Chandler branch. Let me run over rates real quick because this week was a little bit different than we've seen for a while. We actually saw the mortgage-backed securities bonds actually hit a resistance level and back off a little bit. So we saw rates tick up a little bit this week, which we hadn't seen for a little while. So nothing to get alarmed about. It's just kind of natural. Nothing ever goes straight up or straight down when you're talking financial instruments like that. They always go in a zigzag pattern. So nothing to get alarmed about, but let me share my screen real quick, just share with you guys what rates are looking like, and then we'll turn it over to Shane real quick, and then we will ultimately turn it over to our guests, which I'm sure you guys are here for more than Shane and I. You guys see my screen?
Yep.
Thumbs up. All right. Just real quick here. So you can see we ticked up basically across the board. We ticked up about an eighth this week. And it started pretty much at the onset of the week where the bonds started to retrace. So right now, a 15-year is running on a conventional 15-year fixed 2.625, which, I mean, come on, really? That's nothing to sneeze at. Yeah, we were at 2.5 there for a little while, but 2.625, there's a lot of money you can save by refinancing into a 15-year and saving yourself a ton of money in mortgage interest. And the 30-year is running, hang on, I think we got a couple people, let me see if I can figure this out. I think we got a couple people in the waiting room. Well, let me finish this up because I can't, I don't think I can see the waiting room at the same time. Sorry, guys. Yep, okay, I can. I'm still slightly technically challenged here with Zoom, so bear with me. The 30-year fixed, we ticked up a little bit. We were running right at 3%, 2.99. Now we're at 3 1/8. Same with the 30-year fixed FHA and the VA as well. We were at 2.75 on those. Now we're at 2.875. Same story with the government loans that we've been talking about the last few weeks. Those have a little bit of a premium on them. That's why you see half a point on those right now to get those rates. And then last but not least, which is somewhat anomalous, is the 30-year fixed jumbo. That's actually come down an eighth. If you recall, we've been running about 3.625. So that's continuing to tighten up with all the other products, as we kind of been talking about for weeks now. Where that had gotten hit when COVID hit, because that doesn't have any real government backing. So anyway, that's where we're at on rates. Nothing to be alarmed about. We just kind of trended up a little bit, but I think we're going to continue to stay down here near these rates for a while. There's nothing looking like we're going to see these rates all of a sudden spike on us. So, Mr. Shane, how you doing today?
I'm good. Good morning, everyone. A good crowd today. Everybody's got their coffee or their favorite drink, I hope. This is what gets my day off to a great start. Real pleasure to be here today. Obviously, having Mike in here is awesome. Mike does a lot of CE classes for me and a bunch of other stuff. He is our VP and corporate counsel, so gonna get some good stuff today. I know this is kind of Raj's idea last week about rental properties and LLC, so we're gonna focus on that today. So hope you got some questions, because I know Mike would love to answer them.
Yes.
want to show you something real quick. And this week was another interesting week in the fact that talking to a lot of agents about lead sources and where to pick up listings. And right now we're actually looking at Canadian owners here in the valley here because they're kind of locked out right now. So and they kind of aren't coming back down. So it may be a great source for you to pick up some listings that way. I've been pulling things. There aren't as many Canadians in some of these cities as you think there are. It's kind of funny when you start looking at them, looking at these cities as a whole. But I've been covering some pockets and trying to farm some of this stuff out and letting people go after them because we could also find emails and phone numbers too with these guys. So they can't hide. There's no hiding. So I want to show you real quick what I saw here in the valley this past week, and I'm just generalizing with Phoenix, as we have people scattered all over the valley today with us. But again, another week where we're seeing an uptick in median list prices. They continue to climb in that 90-day line here. They did fall a little bit in the short term, but we had some lower price listings come on the market, which forced that thing down a little bit. But again, Phoenix as a whole at 479.4, I think is it's very high. And again, we're looking at inventory levels that continue to do what they do as well. I mean, it looks like it kind of flattened out a little bit last week, but still putting pressure downward on that 90-day average. So a lot going on here. New inventory, what was sold last week, so you can see where that inventory is being gobbled up, and that's really all over the valley, as you know. So I just pulled Phoenix as a reference tool here, but if you're not getting these reports and you'd like to, let me know. I'll get you set up for this. And like I said, any city, any zip code in really in Arizona, and you can share them with your clients as well. So really cool stuff there. Interesting. I did talk to a lender yesterday about interest rates, and he said they did tick upward. And that's interesting. I mean, I do expect them to come back down, but who knows? It's just the year's just been crazy anyway. So we just continue to ride the roller coaster. So good stuff. Well, without further ado, I want to get Mike going on this thing real quick, and I don't want to take up a whole lot of time. We get Mike talking about some rental properties and the value of getting them into an LLC and all that kind of good stuff. So I'll turn it over to Mike.
All right. Get to do this. How's everybody doing today? We're doing good? All right. At least somebody's going to react to something, I guess, on there. Actually, I beat Shane this time to get up to the cabin. I said, I'm getting the heck out of the hot valley with all that weather. So, yes, up and nice and cool. It sounds nice and cool. It's 85 outside right now, I think it is.
I'm staying down here in the heat this weekend. So.
Oh, for you. So. Anyways, hopefully all you guys or some of you will have questions, because that's how I would rather do stuff like this, because I deal with a lot of people in my law practice that have rentals and everything, and a lot of you know that because you work with me, and I try to make sure that we set up for a lot of asset protection, because the one thing people don't realize is how risky a rental unit actually is. When you own a rental unit, many things can happen. Give an example, I always use, and those of you who had classes, I use the example all the time because it was one of my clients in Ohio. And it dealt with one of his up-down duplexes that he had. You walk up the outside steps, you go to the landing, you go in the top, or apartment, if you want to call it that way. But he had an up-down duplex that he rented out, and it was Christmas time, and of course there's no smoking in the duplex and everything. So they had everybody standing out in the railings and everything, and they were sitting there smoking, and one of the guys was leaning back against the railing, and all of a sudden fell off. Paraplegic time. So that ended up in a big lawsuit, of course. And normally we all say, hey, we have insurance. Everybody, and that's the first line of defense. We want insurance. But an insurance company's number one goal is to make money, and that is to not pay claims. I know I used to work as for one of our underwriters years ago as a counsel, and that's what we always did, is you don't want to pay anything if you can avoid it, because your job is to make money. So in this particular instance, the insurance company actually went to the tenant and talked to him about the incident to say, what all happened. And he proceeded to tell him how he had been telling the landlord about that railing for months, telling him how dangerous it was and it needed repaired, and that landlord never did anything. Well, you have a duty under your insurance policies to maintain a safe premises. And if you find out that there is a known defect or problem at that place and you don't fix it, you're responsible for everything that flows from that damage without insurance, because they can deny the claim because you did not fix it. And that's what they did in this case. As they said, we're providing no coverage. We had nothing we could do to get insurance on this because they wouldn't pay out. So it was up to my client. But thank God we had the proper planning, and his property was in an LLC. And because it was in an LLC, the tenants or the injured party, the only thing they could do was sue the LLC because it's a separate and apart from the owner. And because we had it in a separate LLC, my client didn't lose the other like 30 houses that he had. He only lost the one house. They ended up getting a judgment, forced the sale of it. He did have equity in it, but it really wasn't, hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars. It was Canton, Ohio, for God's sakes. It was about 65, 70,000. But he at least, that was all he lost, was that one unit. Had he not had that in a separate LLC, he would have lost everything, whatever was in it. Even if he had 5 properties in the LLC, he'd lost all 5 of them. So that's why we like to end up putting rental properties in their own LLC. And I'll back up a little bit and talk to you about different type of assets you may have in addition to that. Because when I deal with people, I end up doing a lot of this total asset protection for them, where we look at what they have and we try to structure a plan so that if God forbid something like that happens, you don't lose everything you've worked your entire life for. And a lot of it deals with, we look at the type of asset that you have. And we'll go over like a normal person that has done well in their life. They went ahead and got some assets. They've invested. And they might have a rental property or 2. Have some bank accounts. Nice, maybe an E-Trade account, $100,000 or so. 401ks and IRAs, so they're not doing too bad. They up to about $1 million or so, so they're really taking off. What we do is we do a structure whereby we look at the assets that they have. And you have 2 types of assets that you have to look at or think about. You have what are called active assets and passive assets. Does anybody, and this is, I want to try to make it a little bit interactive like I do when I teach, does anybody know what the difference between an active asset and a passive asset? If you do, unmute yourself. Come on in and tell me. Anybody want to take a shot?
Yeah, don't be shy, guys. Feel free to unmute
don't be
yourself.
shy. Yeah, don't be shy. Everybody's going, I have no idea. Come on, somebody take a guess. Emma keeps going, maybe I'll take a guess. No, I won't. Maybe I'll take a guess. No, I won't. No one's ever heard the difference between an active and a passive asset?
Well, I've heard the difference between an active and a passive, business or
investments. Yeah, because it's different because we talk about taxes, we talk about active income, passive income.
Correct.
And you have to distinguish it because this is a lot different. You got to think of it as what the asset does. An active asset is something that can create liability by and through its use or its own actions. I have a car. That's an active asset. I run down the road and run over somebody. A rental property, we just saw how that can create liability. A business can create liability. Those are active assets. The second type is your passive asset. And you think of that as your E-Trade account. When's the last time you've ever saw a big headline that an E-Trade account went down the road and ran over people? It can't. By its sheer operation, it creates no liability. It just sits there and hopefully grows and earns and makes money. The reason why you have to know that is whenever you're designing an asset protection plan for anybody, you cannot mix active and passive assets. The biggest mistake that I see people do is even in their business. They go ahead and they start saving all sorts of money in their business and have all this money in their business. and they're operating their business and they have, you know, a couple $100,000 in their business. You don't want to do that, because now if I sue the business, those are all my money. I can take that. Or else, you know, God forbid, they take their business and they go ahead and they put their automobile in their business because they think that's great. I'll write it off. I'll have my business own my car. And then you're off on the weekend out going to the lake and you get into a bad accident, and now your business is also being sued because your car is owned by your business. You don't mix these types of assets, or you don't have a bank account. Like I take all passive assets and I tell you, okay, if you have, you know, a nice savings account, that we want to have an LLC that owns that savings account. You know, we don't put other active assets in with it. We just have that separate as passive asset. You know, like my E-Trade account, my Edward Jones account that I have, they're in separate LLCs. Now, we go ahead and say they're in LLCs. If I go out and get into an accident, my passive assets are protected because they're owned by an LLC. We want to make sure they're all separately owned. And the reason why they're protected, though, is, you know, you got to think of types of entities we use and different protections they give you. Go ahead and we think of, I talked to you about active and passive assets. Now we'll look at internal and external risks to explain why we use LLCs. You own everything individually. You get into a car accident, I sue you. Almost everything you own is at risk if I get a judgment, okay? There's a caveat to that in Arizona, which is 401ks, IRAs, qualified money, okay? If you have a 401k or IRA, I tell you to plow as much money into that as you can. That is the best asset protection in Arizona, bar none. The reason why it is, without all these other stuff I'm talking about, is in Arizona, we have an unlimited exemption for qualified money, 401ks, IRAs. So say I have $500,000 in my IRA. I can go bankrupt and none of my creditors can touch it. I come out of bankruptcy with my entire 401k, my entire IRA, everything. No creditor can touch it but the US government. So that's why I say we use that. But you have all this other money or other assets out there that you want to protect and not lose. Because maybe you have an investment account that has some nice money into it, or any other asset. But we have two types of risk. We have things that are called internal risk, which would be inside, and external risk, outside. And you have to understand the difference with that, because this is why the difference between it is why I use so many LLCs, not corporations. A lot of people like corporations. I don't use corporations that often, just because of this. Now, with an internal risk, that is something that occurs inside the LLC, the corporation, or whatever entity it is, that creates liability. So I own a business and I sell widgets, and all of a sudden my widgets hurt somebody. Well, because that was internal activity, it doesn't matter if I have a corporation or an LLC, it's going to do the same thing. It's going to keep that liability inside. Think of my rental unit, my friend, client's rental unit. Because we had that LLC, what happened inside that rental unit stayed inside. So it didn't come out of the LLC to where they could get his assets. So that's what we say is an internal risk. They're the same whether it's a corporation or an LLC. Now with an LLC, with a risk, we have external risk. That's things that occur outside the activity of whatever you have in here. You're driving down the road again and you run over somebody. That's an external risk, because what I do is I sue you and then I attack every asset that you own. If I get a judgment, I could take your assets, except we have differences between LLCs and corporations. With a corporation, it's owned by stock. And because it's owned by stock, I can grab that stock and sell it, and now I have everything you've ever owned. and that company is mine. I can sell whatever's in it. It's totally different with an LLC. An LLC is owned through membership. Okay, those interests, according to Arizona revised statutes, are non-accessible. You cannot grab them. You cannot take them. The only thing that you can do is obtain a thing called a charging order. If you've ever heard of a charging order, it deals with LLCs. And what it does is it says, LLC, if you ever disperse money, Mike, it has to go to this creditor. If I own my LLC and I'm going to make a disbursement and I know it's going to go to a creditor, am I going to disperse it to me? Or maybe I'm going to hire my brother to give me absolutely terrible investment advice and lose it all. Makes it simple. We use it to try to keep everything there. We can actually just let it sit until the judgment goes away and expires. Now, 10 years now, they've said 10 years, we wait 10 years, it's gone. We don't worry about it. Hey, unless they renew it. So there's a lot of things that we can do to just wait it out. So these are reasons why we use an LLC when we're doing this. Now, getting to rental units, how many of you have rental units? Anybody out there have rental units? All right. If you have rental units, you already know, and I know Raj knows, you have them in separate LLCs. And you can do more with that when you get a bunch of them. You can start doing layering of LLCs and everything else. That'll really help keep everything separate and make it ease of operation. What I'll do is I want to see if I can get some people involved so I just don't ramble on and say, let's go ahead and ask some questions. Yes, go ahead, Kirk.
I've got a question. Back when you were talking about that rental property got taken.
Yeah.
Did that guy have a lien on that property?
At that time, no, he did not, unfortunately.
What happens if there is a lien on that property? What happens to the lien? Obviously, the equity, the person who sues and wins is entitled to that equity. Are they required to liquidate the property and pay the lien? How does that work, Mike?
Yes, and that's a good thing because it leads to what we normally do with properties now when we transfer them into LLCs. When I foreclose on a property owned by anybody or an LLC, say they have down duplex, when they foreclose on that property, what happens is they have to marshal all liens. That judgment that the person got that was injured attaches to the property in the priority that it records. So I have to sell the property. I have to pay off every underlying lien holder that's there. So if there's liens on it, then they all get paid. And that's why what we usually do when we deal with investors is we do a lot of what's called equity strip. If it has a lot of equity in the properties, we go ahead and when we do a transfer to the LLC, we treat it basically as a sale. It's selling it from you to that LLC. And we take back what's called a growing note and growing equity note and deed of trust that says, hey, we're actually going to sell it to our LLC, but all the equity I'm going to maintain and keep, and then I transfer it to another LLC. And what that does is you don't make payments on these things. There is an interest rate, so it goes up every year. The note says that you're going to pay 6% interest, say. It's payable quarterly. However, the borrower, the LLC, has the choice to pay it or not pay it. If it does not pay it in a quarter, it capitalizes and just increases the amount of mortgage. We do that so that if something happens and they foreclose, you have a phenomenal argument that you're actually going to get all that equity, and a lot of times you do. Now, they could try to claim fraudulent transfer, do all sorts of other stuff. That's all litigation. We can get into complicated stuff and talk to you for hours. But that's what happens is what we do is we sell it. We're going to take that equity back. And unfortunately, at that time, we didn't have one of those on his property, or else he wouldn't have lost the amount of money he did. But that's what we normally do now. We do a lot of equity stripping so that it does protect that equity. Other questions? Everybody's just sort of like staring off into space. You have to have a question.
I have a question.
Yes, Raj.
So, yeah, thanks for sharing this information. Now, let's say you have multiple properties. Let's say you have 5 properties in 5 separate LLCs. Right now, you have one checkbook that you just write one check for, for any expense.
Yeah.
Well, but when you create 5 LLCs, are you required to have 5 separate checkbooks? It becomes an administrative nightmare. So if
It does. I do it a little bit different. When you get multiple properties like that, I usually tell my clients, well, first, yes, you want separate checkbooks unless, I tell them, because you want separate checkbooks because every LLC or every business needs to stand on its own. And that's what I really warn people about when you have any type of business or an LLC that has rental units, don't pay personal bills or anything out of that checkbook. Because as soon as you start doing that, you just gave up it. They're going to say it's nothing but a fake one. It's an alter ego, they call it. And they'll just
Piercing the corporate shield.
Yep,
right.
Just take it away so you don't do it. Now, what I do when we have multiple LLCs like that is I usually advise my clients to have a holding company and a management company. And so what we do is we start a management company, and that management company becomes the manager of each one of these LLCs. And since you own everything, you have that management company maintain the books for every one of these LLCs. And you can set up sub-accounts and everything if you know how to do it. It's not hard. And QuickBooks and everything, and maintain one checking account, because all your rental is going to pay to the management company, just like you would hire a management company on the outside. And then it cuts checks to each one. Have separate checkbooks is the best way to do it, but they can also disperse to you out of that one LLC. But that's what we do, is we try to simplify it by having a parent, management company. And you can actually, I like to own them up into a holding company as the member too, just to give a separate line of defense and everything else. There's a lot of things we can do.
So my fear is, what if someone sues the management company?
Well, to sue the management company is very difficult, because remember, if I'm going to sue you, it has to be because of some activity that you did. The management company, I suppose in theory, your clients could say they mismanaged the property, but it would be very hard because they have no contractual basis with that management company. So it's going to make it very hard. And that management company doesn't own the LLC. So even if it gets a judgment against it, and you have $1,000 in the checkbook that you haven't dispersed, $1,000, okay, by then you'll get rid of it. So it's really not going to be something that somebody could sue and grab, because it doesn't create, or doesn't have an activity attached to it that's going to go ahead and create that liability. You could sue yourself, I suppose, but for mismanagement, but that's about it. Make sense?
Yes. And did you suggest that you have a holding company on top of the management company?
Well, I don't have it on top of the management company. What I usually do is, say I have 5 LLCs here. I have a management company a lot of times here that manages it. Then above here, I'll put an LLC. And all these will be owned by this LLC. And just common ownership, and it gives you another layer of protection, because say this one does get pierced and they start growing after everything, they're going to have to still come after this and pierce this before they can get to you. So it's a good way to do it.
Okay. So in that sense, the management company is that holding company?
No, the management company is separate and apart.
Okay.
Because you'll have the holding company here, the 5 here, up to this holding company, and then the management company will be independent over here.
Okay.
Yeah, the holding company is like passive, basically.
It's all passive. All these are passive. And it's great when you're dealing with partnerships too, because I have a lot of people that invest with other people that they're not married to. So that automatically creates a partnership. And they want to have a bunch of rental property. Well, I tell them, don't set up separate ones that you guys each own whatever percentage you're going to own them in. Start a holding company that you own according to the interest that you're going to do. Say you're 50-50 partners. So now we have 50-50 partners, and you start buying all your rentals under here. Because if you had 10 rentals that you had a business partner with, that you were owning them with, that would be 10 separate tax returns you would have to file. You don't want to do that. You want to have one that you file. So we have all these partnerships, they're owned here. And then all these for IRS tax purposes become disregarded entities. That's only for tax, not legal or anything else. And you only have to have that one tax return. Really saved you a lot of money.
Yeah, thank you. So I was just going to ask you that question. So you don't need to file 5 separate tax returns, you just file one?
Just one. Even as long as any of these we set up are owned 100% by you, or 100% by you and your spouse, they are considered disregarded entities for IRS tax purposes. Do not require the filing of a tax return. So even if you had 50 properties owned by a holding company, and you and your wife or you and your spouse or whatever owns it, you have no tax returns to file at all, because all these are disregarded as far as the IRS sees them. And that's what I try to do when I do a lot of planning, is I hate to have people have to file all these tax returns out there. They get expensive. I know. I'm part of an international tax consultancy, and I know, we don't do domestic, we only do international tax. It has to have an international component, but I know how expensive it gets to pay these people to do tax returns. We don't want to do that, so that's what we try to cut everything down.
Mike, you said if it's owned by you and the spouse, then you don't need to file any tax return. But so it goes under your personal tax return?
Yep, it goes right on your personal tax return because you live in Arizona. That's for community property states. Now, if you move to a non-community property state, now it's different. And in that case, what I usually do, because of this thing called the Garn-St. Germain Act, is we go ahead, and if it was like when I'm in Ohio, when it's husband and wife there, they say, oh, it's a partnership because it's not community property. So what we do there is we have it owned by the family trust. And that's where you should always have it owned if you have a trust. But that's one of the reasons why, if they didn't have a trust, and we're doing this with husband and wife, I tell them, let's get a trust. Because within a year or two, you're going to pay off that trust in savings on tax returns. Plus, it's going to avoid probate and all sorts of other things. So if you do that and put it into a trust, even if it's a husband and wife that's beneficiaries under the trust, the IRS deems it to be one, no tax returns. So it makes it a lot easier.
So you're saying that if you create a living trust, then the trust owns the holding LLC, is that right?
Yep. You should always, everything that you own, if you have a trust, everything that you own should be owned by your trust. Otherwise, why did you have it? And this is a thing that I get furious with other attorneys or practitioners or whoever that do trust work, because I do a lot of it. And I'll have people bring their trust into me and say, Mike, you review it, I review it. And I say, wait a minute, I happen to pull your deed. Why isn't your house deeded into the trust? It says in my trust that everything I own is there. No, it's not. Unless your asset is specifically titled in the name of the trust, your trust does not own it. You have to file a deed. If it's bank accounts that are not owned by an LLC, you have to have it either owned by your trust, or you put a transfer on death provisions, transfer on death or payable, that says if I die, this is who it goes to my trust. If you don't do that, it's no good. Why have a trust? Just like your LLCs, all of them should be owned by your trust if you have a trust. So always put those up.
Great, thank you.
Yep. Anybody else has good questions? Other people, questions? Some questions. And this is the time you get free legal stuff. So
I know, right? I knew
Yeah.
we were going to go over today.
Yeah.
That was a given when we had 2 guests, but it's not often we get Mike on here. So now's the time.
What about umbrella policies? Do you recommend?
I absolutely do. A liability umbrella policy is always the first step. Even though I tell you, insurance companies, I don't trust them. That's why I do other things. liability umbrella policies, the first thing we'll do is, even if they turn down coverage, because what they'll end up doing is they'll reserve the right to deny, is they'll start paying for the defense up front. So it'll save you a lot more than the premiums you ever did just for the defense that they start paying for at the beginning, even if they eventually deny coverage. But I always have one because if they pay out, which normally they do because most things are strict accident, car accident, something like that. Hey, judgments today, they can go millions. That's why I personally carry a $2 million one. I tell everybody to at least have $1 million if you have assets. Now, if you don't have assets, bankruptcy. That's what it is. You don't need that. But yeah, Darcy, you definitely want an umbrella policy.
So if you have say you have absolutely all your homes are paid off, all your properties are paid off, you have, I know, it's crazy. Well, I'm just saying if that were the case.
Yes.
And you've got your umbrella coverage, $2 million.
Mm-hmm.
You still would recommend getting everything in the LLCs.
Absolutely. I tell everybody, never, ever, ever own anything in your own name if you have any type of assets, that are good. Never. I will never own something in my own name because even with a liability policy, I get into something really bad or they deny coverage, then everything's gone. It's one time we put everything in there and it's protected. Now, if you have everything paid off, like, houses, different things like that, we strip the equity out, put them in an LLC. We take that equity and put it into a separate LLC. We protect all that because what I want is that if you get sued, that you don't lose everything. And I'll give you a little secret what we attorneys do. Back when I used to litigate years ago, I used to do the same thing. We'll go ahead and somebody will say, I want to sue that person. And we'll go, okay, fine. And we'll go ahead and check what that person owns. We have ways to search for assets. And if we see them, oh man, everything's convoluted, everything's out there. I'm not going to go ahead and sue that person. Why? Because if I sue it on contingency, what am I going to collect? Nothing. A judgment is worth nothing. A judgment is a piece of paper. That's all it is. If I have nothing to collect on, why am I going to do it? So if I see you have nothing, I can't find any of your assets, or I see they're all crazy, then it goes ahead and walks away, the attorney does. Or else what we normally do is I give them a referral to somebody I hate just so they can waste their time.
Or you request a huge retainer that they're.
Or we say, okay, that's what they'll do. Give me $100,000 and I'll sue them.
Yeah.
So that's what we do. Just because, but you have to keep in mind too, is just because you have an asset protection plan in place, and this is another thing I get upset with people that say, I can make you judgment proof. Oh, you always have to defend yourself, no matter how, structured you are, because I've seen people that say, I don't have to do anything. And then they let judgments go. Then people make movements to pierce them. And unless you defend it, the court's going to rule, no response. It's a default judgment to the other side. And then they're wondering why they grabbing assets. I'm going, because you never fought. If you would have fought, they would have stopped a long time ago. So you're doing determined.
Right. Thank you.
Yep. And do you have an LLC and a trust? Those just depends on how much money you have, your assets, because trust, a lot of times I do warn, are oversold, because say somebody, you just bought a house, you have really not much equity in it, you have $25,000 in the bank, and that we can do beneficiary deeds, transfer on death things that you don't necessarily need a trust. That's why I don't believe the shysters that go, you have more than $75,000 worth of assets, you need trust. Oh my God, we got to do this. You're going to be in court for 2 years. No, you're not. We can prevent all that. So there's different things.
Well, and I can attest to that. I'm a client of Mike's, and we've had these discussions, and LLCs do a phenomenal job. If you know where you've got everything and you've got it protected properly, you don't necessarily need a trust.
Yeah. And if you want to go ahead and be incognito, like I do a lot of what I call privacy protection for people. that we can set everything up that you can search for me night and day anywhere you want. You'll never find anything that I own without getting me on what's called a debtor's exam, because we use layered LLCs with other states owning them that do not require the disclosure of who the owners are, the members or managers. I do a lot of this. I just closed several. A guy that is very uber wealthy, I just did their signings and everything because he can't have everybody know where he lives. And have another guy, his wife's psycho, I just did it for too. Ex-wife, I should say. She's a doctor and actually tried to kill him. And so that's why he's in hiding. But we use layered LLCs and I sign everything. If you go search, you'll never find who owns it. So that's what we end up doing too. So if anybody wants to disappear, we can have that happen.
For one more question?
Yeah.
Okay. So let's say you created an LLC, you purchased a rental property worth $400,000. You have 25% equity.
Yep.
So your equity is $100,000.
Yeah.
Is there a way to protect that $100,000?
Yeah, that's where I was talking about. We do an equity stripping note and deed of trust. So you go out there and you put it down. You know we're going to have to close in your own name when you initially purchase it. When you go ahead to transfer it to your LLC afterwards, we're going to take and do a note and deed of trust. And we're going to record it from your LLC to you or to one of your other LLCs as a holding company at the time of closing, treating it basically as a sale. So now that $100,000 worth of equity is safely in this other LLC here. So if I foreclose on this, I have to pay off the first mortgage and the second mortgage that I own up here. That's what we do, is we strip off that equity.
Great.
That's a great question, Raj. Yeah, that's a neat trick to protect equity in your properties. Yeah. Hey guys, we've ran over. I knew we were going to run. Mike is a wealth of information.
Thank you.
We can get you Mike's contact information for any follow-up questions. Or to help him with these types of issues, or have him help you with these types of issues. Highly recommend it. Highly recommend. You cannot protect your assets too much, especially this day and age. People will sue you at the drop of a hat. So highly recommend getting Mike on board and have him help you. I'd like to, before we wrap this thing up, does anybody have any last questions for Mike? Just check real quick.
What do you charge to create an LLC, please?
$7 million.
There you go.
It's a discount too.
Yeah, you get a hell of a discount there. Generally between, for LLCs, depending on what we're doing, they're generally between $895, $995, but realtors get a 25% discount. So you always have to make sure you know that, hey, I'm a realtor. So we give that.
Good question.
All right.
Hey guys, just before we wrap up here, we have Emma Totten with us today too, from Remodel Social. And for all of you realtors out there, Emma is a valuable resource to help you maximize your social media. So Emma's a regular here on our Friday morning coffee, and she's here today to share another tip with you before we head out.
Yep. So hi, everybody. I understand if you need to hop off. I'm not nearly as interesting as Mike. I have services that cost $7 million. So if you have to go, I totally understand. But yeah, Shane and Kirk always have me on, and I like to share some Facebook tips with you just because I am one of the co-founders of a service called Remodel Social. We offer automated Facebook posting for Arizona real estate agents. So I like to keep you guys updated on what's going on Facebook and what you need to know. So today I'm going to be talking about a Facebook feature that has popped up in the last month or so, which Facebook has introduced to provide more context to news articles that people are sharing. So basically, they're trying to prevent people from sharing old news as current news. So let me share my screen with you, and I will show you what that looks like so that you guys can be on the lookout and know what is going on. Okay, can you guys see that okay?
Yep.
Beautiful. Okay. So when you click share on an article on Facebook right now, you might see a notification like this one pop up. It's telling you that the article you're about to share is 3 months old or however old it is, and you'll see you have two options, continue or go back. So you can see that Facebook isn't stopping you from sharing older articles that you still think are relevant. It's just flagging them for you so that you are painfully aware of how old the article is and when it was published. So are a lot of articles over 3 months old still relevant? Yes. So our customers have seen these flags on articles about things like why Arizona is a great place to live because of strong job growth, affordable housing, etc. All of that stuff is still true. So we still encourage you to keep sharing and just click continue if you ever do get this notification on an article that you know is still relevant. Facebook is just trying to make you stop and think. And there was actually an update to Facebook's announcement about this feature 2 days ago, and their update said that they are really trying to target coronavirus misinformation with this feature more than anything else. So I really think it might go away sooner rather than later. But for everything not coronavirus related, just be on the lookout for that. And Facebook actually just extended its work from home option for its employees till July of 2021. So I think we're going to keep seeing these kinds of automated features that aren't necessarily super helpful, but they are going to be out there. And so that is my quick tip for you guys this week. Remember that you can always reach out to me at this email address, and you can check out what we offer and get a Greystone discount thanks to Shane at this link. So thanks so much for having me on, guys. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, there's another reason to consult with Emma as well. As she knows, we've had these discussions. I am not a huge fan of Facebook. Don't ask me how they decided to write their programs. It's not user friendly, at least to me, and I think I'm a pretty analytical individual. So Emma's advice is always current and timely. Feel free to reach out to her for any help on your social media as well. She'll get it fine-tuned for you. So, hey, any questions before we wrap up here today? No? Well, hey, I appreciate everybody hanging in there with us. We ran quite a bit over. I think this is by far Mike's
Sorry about that.
No, it was a given.
A lot of ground to cover, right? A lot of ground to cover.
Yes.
Well, absolutely. And I know we could have easily made this an hour or more with the topics we were covering today. So great stuff, super valuable. I hope you guys learned a lot of stuff that can help you personally, also help you in your businesses. And hey, we'll do this again next week. We'll be here, same place. Anything to wrap up there, Mr. Shane?
Go start stockpiling those snow cones for the weekend. It's going to be freaking hot.
Yeah, and go get some listings too. We need more inventory. Go find listings.
Yes.
Swim in your 99-degree swimming pools, you know.
Yeah.
It's going to be awesome. It's going to be awesome. Well,
Mike's got the right idea. He's going to at least be 10 degrees cooler where he's at.
Oh yeah, and we're going to take the UTV out in the woods.
It's even supposed to be warm up there today too. I know, and this weekend.
I know.
In the 90s.
The 90s. Yep.
Yeah,
that seems kind of chilly right about now.
Still about 20 degrees cooler, so we're happy.
Yeah.
See everybody later. Have a great day.
Take care, everybody. Thanks again.
Thanks, guys.
Friday.
Bye now.